Welcome to the 162 Experience. We are coming to you live from Southern California. Steve, good morning. How you doing today?
Benito, what's up, brother?
This is going to be an awesome show. This is where we bring the sports world with the business world. Talking to you about a bunch of topics today. We have in the studio Ralph Perretta, ex-San Diego Chargers rock star. Steve, what do you think about that?
We're excited to have Ralph in. Today we're talking NFL. We're going to talk economics of the NFL, and we're going to talk memories of Ralph's career. Just really excited. Got some good stuff planned for today. Episode 5.
We are ready to rock and roll. Let's talk a couple sporting things here before we get into the interview. We have the NBA playoffs in full swing. You know, one of the things that happened at the end of the season, the Golden State Warriors broke the NBA record, beating the Chicago Bulls. I'm not sure who's happy about that, but you know what? It was an exciting thing. Steve, did you watch that game? Were you watching that live?
You know, I got Warriors fever. You know, I've been a Knicks fan most of my life, which has just led to nothing but misery, quite frankly. So having the Warriors, being back in California, living here, I got Warriors fever.
It was an awesome game. We loved it. We had some interesting stuff. The other night, the Oklahoma City were playing Dallas Mavericks. And you know what? This was one of the best NBA playoff games I saw for a first round. They had the tip in Oklahoma City at the end of the game with 4 seconds left. You know, they reviewed it. The referees went back to the video, and it was amazing because what happened was the crowd's going wild in Oklahoma City. Everybody's just raving, screaming. And you know what? They took about 20, 30 seconds, and the refs did the whole, no good, no good, no good. The crowd went silent, and the only person who was screaming and yelling, running across the whole floor in Oklahoma City was Mark Cuban. And I wanted to bring that up because you know what? That's one of our goals, to have Mark Cuban on this show. Gotta love it.
You know, it's fun. It's whether you're a fan, whether you're a player, whether you're the owner, to see that kind of enthusiasm. Hey, let's go to Ralph. Ralph's in the studio with us. And Ralph, good to have you on the show. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Steve, Benito. It's great to be here with you guys.
Awesome. You miss playing football?
Every day I wake up and I'm feeling that pigskin, you know.
Awesome. We'll get to Ralph here in just a couple of minutes. Hey, Benito, I was listening to an interview the other day. As you know, I'm a huge Yankees fan, and there was an interview that I wanted to play, and then maybe we could just talk about it for a few minutes. The interview is with my great friend, and I use the friend term very liberally because we don't actually know each other, but Nick Swisher. Nick Swisher has been drafted by the New York Yankees to a minor league contract. Before we play the video, anything you want to say?
Yeah, you know what? I'm a huge baseball fan. Everybody who knows me, I'm a avid baseball follower, avid baseball enthusiast, and one of my favorite players is actually Nick Swisher, just because he brings so much energy into the clubhouse, so much. He's like a mentor to these kids coming up through the minors. And Steve, what do you like about Nick Swisher?
Well, I like him. You know, the season, Benito, that I did all the games, 2011, getting to watch Nick play every day, interact with the fans. What you see is what you get. He's one of those guys that loves the game. I think that's just what I love most about him, his childlike enthusiasm. And when I heard this video, I was like, man, we got to play this, the audio portion on the show. So we're going to do a quick 2-minute clip. Then we're going to come back and talk and then do about another 40-second clip. So let's go live to the Michael Kay Show out of New York, ESPN New York.
Right now, you're getting a chance to show what you could do, and you're getting a chance to do it in a franchise. I was there. I know you loved your time here. How important is it that you're getting this chance, Nick?
Well, I think it's amazing, man. I think, with just everything that's happened from, the first time banging my knees up to having the surgeries to, going from Cleveland to Atlanta to getting released to getting re-signed by the Yankees, I think it's all kind of meant to be, maybe in a sense. So for myself, that's how I'm looking at it. I'm trying to have as much fun as I can each and every day because I feel that when I have a big smile on my face, that's when I'm the best player I can be. So each and every day has been a blessing for me. I'm so thrilled and blessed to have this second opportunity and just trying to make the best of it, guys.
Now, you flat out said, I'm not done yet. Why are you so confident?
Well, I mean, what am I going to be negative on myself?
Well, because, but in all honesty, I mean, what you went through, I think, would discourage a lot of different people. Why didn't it discourage you?
Well, it's a good thing I'm a happy guy. It's a good thing I'm a very positive individual, man, because there's a lot of negativity in this game. I think for myself, I've been so fortunate in my career that I never had to deal with any injuries. In the past couple years, man, after having the knee surgeries, it was tough. I tried to come back a couple times a little too early, but to be able to have that full off season under my belt last off season, to get ready to come back and have a pretty good spring training and to be part of an organization that was definitely making a lot of different changes to I guess not fit in a sense. Hey man, what am I teaching my daughter? That when times get tough, you just quit. I'm just going to keep battling, man, because, I want to try and go out on my terms, man. I don't want to try and be pushed out by somebody.
Now, Nick, did the Yankees promise you anything, or are you just at the...
No, sir.
They did not promise you anything?
No promises. I just think for myself, all I was really asking for was an opportunity. And I think in the position that I was in, the past couple of years, man, I really haven't done anything. I don't blame people for writing the things they have or whatever. But for myself, man, I just feel like I got a lot left. I don't know exactly what that is, but I'm really looking forward to try and find out. It's been nice to be able to come down here. The weather's starting to warm up a little bit, which helps a lot. But for myself, man, just being able to put on a uniform and to have something on your chest that means the world to you, it's just great for me.
No, the general.
All right, let's stop right there, Benito. Exciting. Nicky Swisher back in a Yankee uniform. Any thoughts from you on that?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I was paying attention was the interviewer. He was asking him questions, which kind of brought a negative, realm to the interview. But I love how Nick Swisher just sits there and just listens and says, you know what? Why would I be negative on myself? He brings so much positive energy and influence to not only when he's doing an interview over the air, but that's also translates into the clubhouse where the teams and even now the Yankees who are giving him a second shot and just saying, hey, we want to bring that guy in. We want to say, you know what, we believe in you. We can, develop some team members, go out there and kick some ass in the season.
Well, that's all good and well, but let's be realistic. Nicky Swisher, since 2014, he batted .208. 2015, he batted .198 for half the year with Cleveland, and then batted .195 with the Braves. So not exactly lighting it on fire, but hopefully he has a lot more to add to the Yankees than just his batting average.
But as a Yankee fan, you are excited to have
I'm excited. I'm excited.
Oh, yeah.
See Nicky Swish back out there. We're going to play one more clip, and there's one line he says during this that we'll come back and discuss.
Okay, show. I know that a lot of great athletes always say they can, when they envision something, that they could get there. Have you thought about what it would be like and the reception would be like if you run out onto the field at Yankee Stadium in pinstripes again?
Hey, bro, I don't know, man, but I got goosebumps. You just saying that right now. That's just something that, for myself, obviously those 4 seasons that I spent in New York were, I guess, in a sense, glory years for myself.
2009, baby.
That I've had in the big leagues, and I think that has a lot to do with the atmosphere. You play for the front of your jersey and not the back. And I think that means a lot to me. I've always been a team guy. I've always been a rah-rah guy. And, bringing a championship home or being able to help bring a championship home and back to New York would just be, just a dream come true for me.
You'd have to admit.
Yeah, bringing a championship back to New York. The last place Yankees excited to bring Nicky Swish back. Let's go to Ralph. Ralph, as a former athlete, Benito and I are fans. That's all we really are, fans. But as somebody that's played the game, what do you think of a guy like Nicky Swish?
You heard him, Steve. Nick Swish is full of positive enthusiasm, and he's got a passion for the game. And, every time you put on the pinstripes, you represent what I call Yankee pride. That goes all the way back to Joe D, the Babe, the Iron Horse, the Mick, and that's what I like best about that organization.
Awesome, good stuff. Before we get into the Ralph interview, got to do our sponsors. I'll do a quick commercial. Benito, I'll shoot it over to you. And actually, Ralph and I were talking. One of our sponsors is Legal Shield, and Ralph, Legal Shield is now offered through the NFL Alumni Association.
Yes, awesome. The NFL Alumni has a portfolio of companies that its members can access and do business with. And I told your brother Mike a while back that Legal Shield is now inside that portfolio, and which was awesome news.
That's great. That's a good enough commercial for us today. But for those that don't know what Legal Shield is, it's a way for folks that maybe you're priced out of the legal system, which is like everybody, 80 to 90% of us, to be able to pick up the phone, talk to an attorney about anything, anytime, anywhere. They have a variety of different services. And when people see the price, a lot of times people equate cost and value together because Legal Shield's only $20 a month, and it's unbelievable. So if you're listening today, whether you played in the NFL or you're just trying to make it through life, try out Legal Shield. Get in touch with a Legal Shield associate near you.
And I want to bring along our second sponsor just to let you know what it is, Sports eShop. What we do is we go around to NFL cities, Major League ballparks around the country, and we've created this thing called the Ultimate Fan Experience. A lot of people don't understand what they want to do, what they want to see. Is it about tailgating? Is it about seeing the game? It's about the whole experience, getting to the park, finding the cool bars around there, and everything that involves that. So Another thing that we want to do is our podcast is called the 162 Experience. So we want to bring that whole experience to the fans. So if you want to go on an ultimate fan experience, let us know, send us a message, get a hold of us, and we can make that happen. Steve, talking about the 162 Experience, a lot of people don't realize what that was and what it's all about. You want to fill people in on that?
Sure. Benito, as you know, in 2011, I did something that was a dream, maybe of some sports fans, a nightmare for other people. But I decided to see what it was like to go to a whole season. If the Yankees were in Toronto, I was in Toronto. If they're in Baltimore, I was in Baltimore. And that's how we met. And I remember, you're somebody that used to go to for those of you who don't know, Benito's the bar manager at Tilted Kilt. So he would spend a lot of his time interviewing fans and putting it on Facebook. And so we just got to meet, and he thought my story was neat. And we became buddies, and it sort of led to this podcast, the 162 Experience. And people can go to the 162yankeegames.com to get a copy of the book. And Benito, I'm just excited. I'm excited this week. I hired an editor for my second book called The Last 42, where I went to Mariano Rivera's last 42 games, and a little play on words since Jackie Robinson was the last 42. And then Mariano, because he was grandfathered in, got to wear the jersey until the end of the career. What was interesting, on April 15th every year, every player wears number 42, and that was the actual day that I hired my editor, which was a good sign. Yeah,
wow,
I didn't realize it till later.
Wow.
It's fun to go to a game with somebody on April 15th and be like, hey, do you notice anything? And usually girls will be like, and it's like everybody's wearing number 42 today.
It's amazing how many people don't actually know that. But, it is a cool thing, The number 42 Jackie Robinson Day, it's a great thing. So let's get into the interview with...
Yeah, I know you're excited. Benito and I are both big NFL fans. Even though I'm a Yankees fan, I never miss an NFL game, whether it's Thursday night, Sunday night, Monday night, Sunday afternoon. In baseball, I only watch the Yankees, but in football, I pretty much watch every game. So Raul Peretta, former San Diego Charger and New York Giant. Tell us what your early career was like. What do you remember from your early days playing football at Holy Trinity, and then you went to Purdue and then San Diego?
Yeah, guys. Gosh, we're going back into 1967, and I showed up on the practice field. I think I was 14 years old. I was 6'2" and 215 pounds, and I couldn't hit the curveball anymore, and I couldn't run down fly balls in center field. So football became the obvious option, and I just found that I had some God-given physical abilities, and I just loved to play, and I wanted to be a professional athlete. When I was 15 years old, and football was my easiest and quickest vehicle, Steve. Played at Holy Trinity High School, as you mentioned, in Hicksville, New York. Little shout out there.
I know it well. And the reason we know each other is you actually replaced my older brother Mike. Tell that story if you even remember it. I know he remembers.
Well, when I was a freshman, I got moved up to the junior varsity right away, and your brother Mike was the right offensive tackle on that junior varsity team, and he was 140 pounds. And they,
I think he still weighs 140 pounds.
He's looking good. Anyway, so Coach Bruno moved me in at 215, and your brother Mike became a wide receiver and a 440 man on the track team. It was very good. It was all cool.
And you also played. You're on the track team too, right?
Yeah, I threw the shot and discus, which was a welcome respite from the rigors of 2-a-day practices. I guarantee you.
And tell us about the recruiting process of how you were recruited, and maybe some of the differences that you see now with your sons played college ball too.
Yes. Well, in those days, it seemed like scholarships were unlimited, and schools like USC and UCLA, it seemed like they had like 150 guys on scholarship, along with Ohio State and Michigan State. And, we got recruited pretty much the same way they get recruited now, although there are not as many restrictions and regulations.
Did they wine and dine you?
Oh, did they ever? They wined and dined us, and
that's what we want to know about.
Yeah, we want to hear about that.
Those. That's what
were there strippers involved?
Yeah, no strippers, not this time. But there were plenty of co-eds. There were plenty of co-eds, and that was all fine and dandy. At 18, though, you're still pretty wet behind the ears, and the upperclassmen that are showing you around, they obviously knew the ropes, and they were much more experienced. I was kind of bashful, going to these visits to places like Fort Worth, Texas, Charlottesville, Virginia, East Lansing.
So how many schools were
Michigan.
recruiting you, or were you looking at?
I probably had about 50 scholarship offers for football, and I think I had another 25 for track and field. And so I chose Purdue in 1971. In those days, the Big Ten was the Big Ten. And, it was a strong conference, and you couldn't go wrong with the education. You still can't to this day. Since it seems like Drew Brees left, Purdue has fallen on
It was
hard.
the co-eds that made you choose Purdue. Right?
Absolutely.
And did you start right away when you went there as a freshman?
No, freshmen were not eligible, Steve. As a matter of fact, in 1971, they became eligible in 1972, and right down the road from us in Columbus, Ohio, a freshman by the name of Archie Griffin showed up for Ohio State, and he was off the charts as a freshman. But I was fortunate. I got to start my sophomore year that year, 1972, and we had a great team. We had several guys drafted by the National Football League, and played in some great places like Ann Arbor, South Bend, Duke University down in Durham, North Carolina was a fun place to go to, and it was just football. It was what I call football old school.
So
pretty much,
Ralph, when you were going through the ranks, you did the high school, you did college. At what point did you realize, I have NFL talent. I'm ready to go. What was that? What clicked in your head?
Benito, when I was a senior in high school, I started getting accolades and honors. I was just kind of paying attention to the football landscape, and I thought to myself, you know what, I think I have the ability. I have the talent. I have the ability. I have the size. I know I'm quick enough. It definitely became a goal of mine to play in the National Football League. At that time in my life, going to school at Purdue University, that was like a means to an end. I made sure I got my degree because, that was seriously impressed on you in those days because, one injury could end your career.
Still like that today?
Yeah, pretty much.
And what was the size of somebody like an offensive guard back then, Ralph, compared to what it is now? What weight difference you think?
Well, when I came up, Steve, I was listed at 6'3" and 237. Now they would never even let me into training camp, for God's sakes. I would say NFL guards in the 70s were between 245 and 255, 6'2", 6'3". Now they're between 6'3" and 6'7", and they're going all the way up to 350 pounds,
Sheesh.
Which is just pretty amazing, pretty off the charts.
And is it tough for an offensive guard to get as much recognition? Like if you're a star quarterback in high school, everybody's talking about your running back, wide receiver, defensive line. But, the guard, it's not a big glorified position.
Steve, if you're an offensive lineman, you do not play for the recognition. You play for the love of the game. You like the ability to be able to fire out and put your face mask right in a guy's numbers and drive him off the ball. That the satisfaction of a good block is our Heisman Trophy compared to running backs, quarterbacks, wide receivers. The glory boys, I should say.
So I want to give a little value to our audience on the three people that listen to this show. I actually read John Gruden's book, and he was talking about quarterbacks and how he understood the game from that aspect. Now, if there's a player who's in college, a player who's just out of high school, getting those recruits, what was your expertise as an offensive lineman? Was it hand movement, footwork? What was that? What would you say your niche was?
Well, Benito, I always felt like even at 6'3" and 245. I'm playing against guys 30, 40 pounds heavier than me on the defensive line, and I always felt like my quickness was my strong suit. I was not going to overpower those guys because, trust me, there's no gimmies in the National Football League. Every guy, there's a reason why every guy has a uniform, because he's good. I spent a lot of hours studying game film, trying to pick up other players' tendencies and how they would perform in certain situations. Besides trying to out-tough them and out-quick them, I also tried to outsmart them. But a wise old coach said one day, before you can outsmart them, you got to out-tough them.
That's strong. Two quick questions. Best coach you ever had, and then nastiest defensive player you ever played against. So let's start with top coach.
The best coach I ever played for was Don Coryell. Our team was known as Air Coryell, and we won a lot of football games from September through December. There was nobody better in the league in 1979, 80, and 81 than the San Diego Chargers. I mean, we beat everybody. We just kind of ran out of football in January, Steve.
Does that sit with you still tough? Is that, I know you lost the big AFC championship game, which you guys were highly favored.
God, we lost 2 AFC championship games in a row, 1981 and 82. So I'm standing here telling you that I think I should have at least one Super Bowl ring on my finger. And yeah, that kind of haunts you. But at the same time, we gave it all we had. And so we have no regrets. We left it all on the field. But
you got the memories, baby.
But yeah, the memories are there, and unfortunately the what ifs are there also. But that's how it goes.
And so the nastiest player next, and then I know Benito's got another question.
Ooh, I played against some really, really tough defensive linemen: Curly Culp, John Matuzak, Richard Bishop from New England, Sugar Bear Hamilton from New England, Reuben Carter from Denver. These nose guards that were 6 foot tall and 6 foot wide. I'm thinking, where am I going to hit this guy? If I hit him at the ankles, I'm still going to bounce off, But those guys were all really good football players.
Who was the guy in there that was talking the most trash?
Well, John Matuzak, they called him the Twos. The story was he'd come into the team meeting with the Oakland Raiders and he'd go, "Hey, gentlemen, what day is it today?" And they'd all go, "It's Tuesday." But John liked to run his mouth a little bit. He's deceased. I don't want to say any negative things about him. But another guy was a former Long Islander, Lyle Alzado.
Oh yeah,
wow. Big Lyle. Lyle was always ready for a doubleheader. We didn't know why that was, Steve Benito, in those days until it came out much later.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, both those guys passed away at a very young age. So.
What year do you think drugs like that started entering into football?
Well, I would say right around 1970. But steroids really didn't become prevalent the mid-70s into the 80s, and probably to this day where guys are taking human growth hormones. It's almost like each guy has his own pharmacist, I always felt like if you're taking performance-enhancing drugs, you're cheating, and you're basically admitting that you're not good enough to hang. But that's my opinion, and we all have one.
And has your thoughts on that changed over the years, just because of the way guys are making millions? Or you still feel the same way?
Guys are making gazillions, and they will do anything to keep that paycheck coming. It's almost like it's the instant gratification type deal, because if you just depend on hard work, it takes you a long time. With the PhDs, I mean, you're like, you change your body overnight. The stakes are so high today, Steve, as you said.
And I want to ask you a question about going back into that hard work mindset you had. When you're, say, let's go back to the AFC Championship. When you're in that locker room, right before the game goes, you're strapping up, putting on your cleats. Like, what is that moment right before you're running out the tunnel or going out to the tunnel? What is your mindset when you're hearing those 60, 70,000 fans?
Well, Benito, the butterflies are rampant. I'm telling you. Everybody's broken into a cold sweat. It doesn't go away until that first hit. But when you exit the stadium and you run onto the field and you hear 70,000 people standing on their feet screaming bloody murder, I mean, if you're not ready to play football at that point,
nothing's going to get you jacked up from that, right?
Exactly. It's time to retire.
That's good stuff. Hey, Benito, if it's okay, we're going to switch gears. And I know that, just doing a little preparation for today's show, we started Googling Ralph and YouTube and different stuff, and we came across this sick play, Fiesta Bowl 2007, where it's actually 3 of the most amazing plays within a minute or two that I've ever seen in my life. And so we're going to play a quick clip, and then we would, Ralph, I'm just not even going to say anything. I just want you to comment. So we'll just play the clip.
Yep, this is a ball game right here. 4th down at 2.
To the shotgun.
Boise State and the shotgun.
Oh, my gosh. Vinny Peretta, quarterback.
Yep.
Z in motion.
Peretta is the quarterback. The ball is snapped. Peretta rolling to the right. Fires. Got a man out there. Touchdown, Boise State. Oh, mama. Great.
Steve, that soundbite never gets old listening to, and we're so proud of Vincent. And
so that's your son, Vinny.
Yeah, my youngest son, Vinny, and he came out. He was a 5'10", 185-pound wide receiver, and everybody's going, "Hey, Peretta, what's going on here?" And he's extremely fast, and Boise State took guys like him on their roster, guys that were a little small. Maybe didn't qualify for the Division I schools, so they went to mid majors like Boise State, and the coaching staff was so good that they coached him up, and I knew Vinny would fit in well there because he has such an enthusiasm and a passion for the game. That 2007 Fiesta Bowl win over Oklahoma was the flagship victory in the history of the school. No doubt about it. And, we still, Vinny tells me everywhere he goes in the state of Idaho,
that's awesome.
There people are talking to him about it. So
that was a great moment in college football. I remember it was amazing. Now I want to ask you as a parent. Now you're sitting there in the stands. You're thinking. You're like, okay, we got Bob Stoops, Adrian Peterson, Oklahoma. This is a huge Boomer Sooners, and you're sitting there. You're watching your kid on the field. At what point were you like, Boise State's got a chance? We could win this. What were you thinking right then?
Benito, Boise State was actually kicking their rear end the whole game. It was 28-17 in the third quarter. Oklahoma made a furious comeback and sent that thing into overtime. And, so we had Boise, for all intents and purposes, lost the game until that last play, the hook and ladder that tied it up. So
the play where Vinny threw the touchdown, that was overtime?
That was overtime.
Fourth down?
Adrian Peterson had just scored on a 25-yard run. He ran over about 3 or 4 Boise guys.
That was like the first play, right?
First play of overtime, exactly. And so Boise got the ball, and they were struggling. And as you could see, it came down to 4th and 2 from the 5-yard line. And, you could tell that the depth of Oklahoma was starting to wear little Boise State out. And so after we scored that touchdown, they immediately went for 2 on the Statue of Liberty play when Ian Johnson scored, and then he proposed to his girlfriend.
That's amazing.
I remember that was awesome.
That game had so many moments in it. Quick side question with, talking about your sons, both your sons play college ball. What do you think separates you? It seems like you were a great football parent or a sports parent, but there's so many out there that aren't, was it a conscious decision you made that, hey, like, I'm not going to push these guys or I'm going to encourage them to play sports? What kind of lessons, had you learned in your own life to be able to instill in your kids playing?
Well, exactly, Steve. I made a conscious effort never to push my kids in sports. They naturally gravitated, to athletics. I used to bring them out on the field for Old Timers Day at the stadium. Well, they call it Alumni Weekend, when they would introduce us before a Charger game. And so I'd bring both of them out there, and they'd get to see what it was like on the field at Qualcomm when they were, 8 and 10 years old. And I think that stuck, especially with Vinny. And so they gravitated, and I coached them in baseball. I was a baseball manager, and would you believe I was a soccer coach? But you know what? I held them out of football. I held them both out of football until the 8th grade. And then I said, okay, now you guys can go play football, get a year under your belt before high school.
Why was that? Why weren't you doing Little Pop Warner before that?
Well, you know what, Benito? I started playing when I was 10 years old in CYO on Long Island. I played at Holy Family Grade School, the Crusaders, in Hicksville. And, I started when I was 10 years old, and by the time I was 18, I was feeling a little burnout. Football's a burnout sport. I just didn't want that. I tried to learn from my experience with my 2 sons, and it worked out really well.
Okay, let's talk a little bit, transition if you don't mind, and talk a little bit about the economics of the game. We had a chance on the phone yesterday, Ralph, to chat for a while, and you're not short on your opinions when it comes to what's going on in the NFL. And so maybe let's just start. Maybe you could. Most of our listeners are not big sports fans. Some of them are,
right.
But it's not like we can just go in and start talking about the new stadium. Maybe you could just spend a minute bringing people that know nothing about San Diego or the Chargers or the NFL just up to speed about the current situation. Then we could talk about it.
Well, Steve, as you know, the National Football League is a $10 billion industry now. I mean, the money has gotten stupid. It's gotten ridiculous. And they're projecting that it's going to be $25, $30 billion within a matter of 5 or 6 years. So everybody is getting rich. Okay, you have 32 owners that are billionaires, and you have all your players that are becoming millionaires. I mean, our quarterback here, Phillip Rivers, what does he make a year? $25 million a season? Unfortunately, when the business is that big, the business decisions supersede the football decisions, which I find very regrettable. And here we are in San Diego, and we're in this little stadium mess, is what I call it. And nobody wants to see the Chargers leave San Diego. I mean, we've had 55 good years here.
Wow.
Gosh, we have to get a new stadium built somewhere. But I'm just not so confident about the current strategy downtown.
So, Ralph, I want to ask you also about the stadium economics. You said that a lot of people, the whole thing about going to a game is experience, the tailgating behind it. Now, what are the implications saying of moving to a Los Angeles or staying in San Diego? Like, what is the big difference? I know it's revenue, but where's that viewpoint at? Where is it?
Benito, the situation basically is this. Forbes magazine lists the Charger franchise as being worth right now in San Diego about $1.6 billion. Okay,
and where is that as far as like the 32 teams? Is that towards the top, towards the bottom, or the middle?
I think it's right in the middle, Steve.
Okay.
To give you an idea, I think the Spanos family bought the Chargers in 1984 for $70 million. So they've made a nice little return on their investment. If the Chargers were to move to Los Angeles, which is, as we discussed, the number one or number two market in the United States, the magnitude of that would the value of the franchise would actually double, guys, to over $3 billion if they moved to Los Angeles. Now, as a business person, what would you do?
See ya.
I have a feeling I think I'd know what I'd do. But.
And it's so interesting. The other thing too is it's very interesting to see when a sports franchise is passed down, like with the Yankees. I'm not really happy with the way the Steinbrenner kids are running it. People had a lot of things to say about George, but he won. He was willing to open up the checkbook, and these guys don't have that same kind of attitude. It seems like with San Diego, it's the same thing. Do you think is the son doing as good job as the dad did?
You mean Dean Spanos?
Yeah.
Yeah. Dean has kind of taken over for Alex for about the last 20 years. Honestly, Steve, he's been kind of invisible. Look at all last off season. He let Mr. Fabiani do all his talking for him, and I would like to see Mr. Spanos be more visible, be more accessible, communicate with the fans and the season ticket holders. That's personally what I would like to see from him. I guess he doesn't feel comfortable doing that, so he hired Mr. Fabiani, who, he's got a rap a mile long. That guy.
And so, what's the current situation now? Are the people in San Diego going to vote on it? Is it that we're being taxed per person? What's going on?
Well, this whole situation with the downtown stadium, it has to come to a vote in November when we vote for the president of the United States. So right now, as we speak, they're starting a push to gain 67,000 votes, which we need to get the stadium issue on the ballot in November. If it passes, if the San Diego city residents vote in favor of the stadium, then they can move forward. I don't know about the county residents, though. And
what do you think's going to happen? If you had to make a prediction, are we going to see the San Diego Chargers back one more year? Is it over?
Well, from what I've seen and heard around town, Steve, it doesn't seem like the voters are in a mood to vote for an additional $400 million in taxes. to help build an NFL palace in downtown San Diego. That's just what I gather from what I'm hearing.
We were talking about it yesterday, Ralph, too. It's a shame because we haven't seen the Super Bowl in a long time now.
Right.
The NCAA championship game would probably be here, as well as some other, bowls, because obviously the stadium we have now is sort of embarrassing, for a big game like that.
It really is. The stadium is kind of falling apart right now. It definitely needs a makeover at the very least. I personally prefer the Mission Valley site. And as we discussed, nobody in the NFL tailgates like San Diego Charger fans. And even the visiting fans love to come here and tailgate. I don't know how you could do that with a downtown stadium. I think that's a key component to the Charger game day experience, that the Chargers are kind of missing right now when they're talking about a downtown stadium.
Yeah.
I just don't see it. Do you, Benito?
I want to lead into another question because it has to do with that. As a Charger fan, Ralph, do you think that the fans would go for and be like, hey, you know what, we're okay with being taxed to bring in a new stadium? Or do the Chargers have to win in order to bring that new stadium vote?
Well, there's no doubt about it. A winning program, a Super Bowl winning program would sure go a long way in convincing city and county voters to vote for the referendum. No doubt about it. Last year, we were 4-12. And
it was a good 4-12. There were a couple of close games.
There were so many close games, Steve, that the reason why we lost, in my opinion, was because of all the distractions of the stadium issue. And as an athlete, as a ball player, you can't have those subliminal distractions weighing on you come game day. I mean, you have to have a clear mind and be totally focused.
Benito, I'm going to ask Ralph a question about life after football. We were talking yesterday, and you've been in the same career since '82. So you basically, as soon as you got out of the game, and I guess back then you weren't making enough money where you could just buy an island and sit back and do something. So you've had a regular career. You're in the NFL for 6 years or 7 years?
7 years.
7 years, and then you've been in medical sales, medical equipment sales for over 30 now.
Yes, Steve. When I was at Purdue, I was trained to be a teacher and a coach. That's where I got my degree in. But when you're 29 or 30 years old, you change. And I decided I wanted to give business a shot. And a good friend of mine, a neighbor, said, "Hey, when you're done playing, I can help you get a sales job. I mean, you athlete jocks are naturals in sales because you have good people skills and you know how to work as a team, and you're basically." Nice guys. Anyway,
Ralph, when you realized, hey, I'm ending the game, my passion for the game, I'm out, I'm going to start something new. What was it? What was the hardest thing to overcome? Like, because a lot of guys, they just I guess it might be the downward spiral and whatever happens. But what was your strength where you came out of that?
Benito, I had just gotten married. I was 30 years old or so, and so I knew going in, I had a good background. I had a good foundation, and I knew I had to work really hard, to support my family. So it was never really an issue. The hardest thing for me going in, selling medical and surgical supplies and equipment was the learning curve. It took me 24 months to really, get in a real comfort zone to where I could talk to cardiovascular surgeon.
I look at that, and a lot of guys from the league go back and they say they want to teach guys what to do, what not to do. And one of the biggest guys right on the platform is Herm Edwards right now. And he's teaching guys what to do with their money, what to do on social media, what not to do more specifically. If you were to go back and talk to these crowds, I don't know if you do now actually or not, but what would you give advice to these guys that are they're coming up and they're going to be the all-stars, the rock stars? What would you say?
I would say, well, first of all, the money changes everything. These guys are, they're all 7-figure guys. The first thing you got to do is take care of that. You got to take care of that paycheck. Put it in the bank. And stay away from all these highfalutin investments because, the higher the risk, the bigger the loss. So that would be the first thing I would tell them. But even before that, when I was coming up, it was critical, and our parents and coaches used to preach to us. Make sure you get your college degree. when you come out of school. And I don't think that has changed, because that always gives you something to fall back on, Benito, if you have that paper.
Ralph, we have a very special guest. We have two special guests in the studio here today.
I can see that.
Friends of mine and Steve's. There we go.
Yes, we have Cassie and Carrie. And Carrie is actually someone that comes on to the podcast and helps us out from time to time. She's a sports enthusiast, and she's actually a local sports reporter in high school. And her vision is to be, sideline reporter. I won't put words into her mouth, but we have her, and she's going to ask you a question. So this is sort of our time for the show where you get to answer a question from a lovely young lady. But besides that, she's just a big sports fan. So, Carrie, come on up to the mic, and we're going to mic her up.
You're
going to come right here. And, Carrie, this is Ralph Peretta, played for the San Diego Chargers for 6 years.
Hey, Carrie.
Played for the New York Giants for 1. And what question would you ask Ralph?
I would ask, were you happy? Was this a career choice that you just absolutely loved?
Well, Carrie, absolutely. I mean, I wanted to be a pro athlete. That was first and foremost. If I had to do all over again, maybe I might choose professional golf. Or if I was good enough baseball, because those, their careers are much longer. And their bodies stay intact for the most part.
Were you happy throughout your whole career? Like, was this a great career choice?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
However, it was a grind. It was a physical grind, a lot of hard work, and you have a short shelf life.
What inspired you to play football?
Well, football was really a way of life. It was a way of life back in the 1960s, and it's evolved over the years to what it's become today. Which is the number one spectator sport in America. It's just, it's the American way.
Yeah.
Violence.
Americans love violence.
Americans love violence.
What do you miss about it?
Carrie, I miss being 28 years old. That's what I miss.
What advice, because I know I have a lot of friends coming up who play collegiate football and everything, and I know times have changed immensely from, I'm guessing, from the time that you joined the NFL and then now. What advice can you give upcoming players? What advice can you give upcoming players trying to get in the NFL these days?
Well, I would tell them, number one, when they're still in college, make sure you get your degree. And that will always give you something to fall back on so you don't end up in the poorhouse. Number two, if you're good enough to make it in the NFL, then work as hard as you possibly can. Stay away from the
temptations.
Stay away from the PEDs, which are performance-enhancing drugs, because eventually they will ravage your body. Like I said, football, you have a short shelf life, and you have your whole life to live afterwards. And there's so many guys out there that took steroids that are sorry about it now.
So you can, after their career, it all sneaks up on them in the end, you feel like? Like, I feel like with all the, I don't mean to, it's kind of morbid, but the suicides and stuff coming from concussions, you think that kind of falls along the same lines?
That's what the NFL is saying.
Yeah.
The NFL is saying that, they're not sure that the head injuries alone are attributed to concussions. They're saying that the use of anabolic steroids in concert with the concussions are making guys go crazy. We have our own examples right here in San Diego, unfortunately.
That's very true. Do you think it would detour any, like if you had grandkids or you knew kids coming up from playing because of how aggressive it is and what they're dealing with?
No, Carrie, I already did. Oh. I already did. Both my sons played high school and college football. So, it's a great game. It teaches you life lessons that you never learn in a classroom. Life lessons that you use all the way to the grave. Believe me when I say that. And I let both my sons play, and I have 2 grandsons now, and I would encourage them to play. The most important thing is when you have these little kids out there playing Pop Warner football, you have to have somebody out there teaching them how to play the game correctly. And I know the NFL is directly involved all the way down to the Pop Warner ranks.
Carrie, that was awesome. We love those questions. We actually have another special guest in the studio, one of Carrie's best friends, Cassie. She's actually a Chargers fan. Woohoo! Yeah. And I just wanted to ask you, Cassie, you have a question for Ralph. What would you like to ask him?
I do have a question, Ralph.
Okay, Cassie.
If you could pick any moment in your career that you'd say you're the most proud of, what would it be?
I would say there were two moments. My first one came in 1974 in South Bend, Indiana. We played the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. I played at Purdue. They were defending national championships. They were defending national champs, and we were 35-point underdogs. And it was homecoming that day, and we ended up beating them 31-20. Playing on that field with some of the all-time greats at Notre Dame was a big deal. The second one was in 1977 when I was with the Chargers. We played once again the defending Super Bowl champion Oakland Raiders, and we hadn't beaten them since.
Yeah.
Benito. We hadn't beaten them since for 9 years, since 1968. And we put together a ground attack and a defensive game plan, and we ended up beating them 12-7. The first time in 9 years when they were, one of the classiest teams in the league.
That's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah, that was very, very cool.
And I'm not sure if this was already asked, but who was your biggest inspiration when you started out in sports?
I would say my dad. Awesome. I would say my dad. And, my dad used to take us to Yankee Stadium in the early 60s, and, to watch Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris, Yogi Berra.
Yeah.
Now we're talking, right, Steve?
Yeah.
And going into the Bronx. And, the Bronx was always kind of dank. And then you go
It's
into...
still dank.
It's so
I
dank.
don't know what dank means, but I think it's still dank.
So you go into the stadium.
I would say.
Right, Steve? And you'd see this field of emerald, right? It was like the Wizard of Oz. The field was just emerald. And I thought to myself, man, wouldn't that be cool to be wearing pinstripes with a number 7 on my back playing center field?
Awesome. Benito, any more questions from you? I'd like to get Carrie to ask one more. Anything you want to add now?
I think that was a great interview. Thanks, Cassie. Thanks, Carrie. Carrie, you have one more question. Let's just go back to Carrie real quick.
I just want to know what your most fondest memory of, just in general. What's your most favorite moment that ever happened?
I'm gonna defer. I'm gonna defer to my son Vincent, Carrie, in that 2007 Fiesta Bowl game. When Boise State beat Oklahoma, because here I am, I'm sitting there, I'm a 53-year-old middle-aged has-been, and to watch my son on the field and be a part of that great victory for Boise State, let me tell you what, the buttons were popping right off my Broncos T-shirt.
Okay, I got good news and bad news. Benito, we want to thank you for your time on the 162 Experience. You've just been replaced by Carrie. And Carrie, welcome to the team. This is exciting. Right. Benito, you're still welcome to come in the studio on Wednesday mornings.
Hey, I'll be the champagne guy pouring everybody mimosas.
For those of you that don't know, we have a tradition here at the 162 Experience. We drink mimosas. How's the mimosas going, Ralph?
Salud.
We like to get our guests a little liquored up. Now, Chris Hughes last week was an exception. Chris is of the Mormon faith, not a big drinker, so we did the show sober last week, which is a little different for us, Benito.
Way different, but he brought it. He brought it big time. Great. Absolutely. We're on episode 5 of the 162 Experience. First week we had Kim Milia, entrepreneur, founder of Work, Play, Love. Second week we had the guys from Flipping San Diego. If you haven't seen that episode, it's amazing. Bedgood and Company.
That's right. Bedgood and the Chief. Week 3 was live. Very hard to hear, but still fun. We did it live outside of Petco.
Speaking of that, Steve, we're going to plan on doing another opening, a live show at a park, possibly Petco, but we got to get that in the books and get it ready to go.
Man, we're excited. We got the All-Star game coming up. One of the reasons I wanted to have my next book done for July, that's the goal, is for the All-Star game. Where it's going to be exciting. And then it's going to be downtown San Diego is going to be off the charts in July. And we have the Yankees coming to town as well.
Ooh, big week ahead in that weekend. Steve, I want to ask you real quick, your next book coming about, what is it about so people can be expected what they're going to read?
It's a sad topic. I lost one of my brothers a few years ago, my older brother Jim. He was a high school dean. He was age 47 at the time, had a heart attack, not to bring down the show, but Jim was somebody that people looked up to. He was an amazing guy. Was a high school basketball star. And man, I didn't know what to do. And as a Yankee fan that had already been to 162 games, I just felt like I wanted to get away. And the Yankees had about 50 games left that season. And I had only been to a few Mariano Rivera games. And I thought, you know what? And I just came up with the idea like that. I'm going to go to the last 42. I'll sit with my brother. We were consoling each other the day after my brother Jim died, my brother Mike and I. And I said, hey, man, I got my next idea. And if you know Mike and his voice, he's like, I think it's a great idea. You should do it. And we started counting down the days. And it opened up in Fenway Park on a Friday night. And I literally went to the last 42 games of Mariano's career. So, it's a book about dealing with grief, but it's also a book about, living life. Life is short. We got to enjoy the journey. And so we got a few minutes left with Ralph. What I'd like to do is sort of just throw out some names or throw out a word and have you just comment first thing that comes to your mind.
Okay.
And let's start off easy. Dan Fouts.
The Dandaroo.
John Gruden.
Chucky.
Roger Goodell. And feel free to expand. You don't just have to say one word back if you want to talk about Roger and what's the current state of affairs with the game.
Roger Goodell? 40 million.
Question for you on that, Ralph, with Roger Goodell being the topic.
Yes, sir.
He obviously has his favorites, as we've seen. Or I don't want to say obviously, but what I've seen in the media saying, like, you have these things, the thing with the Patriots, all this Spygate, all this stuff. Like, I don't want to say favorites, but, as an NFL player, how do you view that?
Well, from what I'm seeing, Benito, Roger's taken a lot of heat, and he's taken a lot of criticism over all these disciplinary issues from Inflategate to wife beatings and what have you. He's the commissioner of the league, and there's 32 guys that love him. Those are the 32 owners because he makes them into billionaires every season.
And is that really his role, though? Is it his role to sort of be the governing body?
Well, it's a large part of his role, Steve. He keeps that cash register ringing. And he's turned the National Football League into quite the cash cow. Now, there obviously are some social issues here that he's being criticized about, but that's not for me to say either way.
Benito, you got another name you want to throw out?
Lawrence Taylor.
LT.
Okay, that's his nickname. You got anything you want to say about him?
Changed the way the game was played on defense.
Really?
No doubt about it.
And so when you're watching film, it's so much different than everybody else watching film. Well, first of all, let's start. When you watch an NFL game, are you looking at the offensive linemen to see what they're doing or who's controlling the ball, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it all depends. If I'm interested in looking at certain offensive linemen, no doubt about it, I zero in on them. A lot of times I just watch the game as a fan, and so I'm watching the football. But a good tip for the fans out there: if you want to know where the football's going, just watch the offensive guards. They'll usually tell you what's going on, whether it's going to be a pass or a run.
We like to ask this question to people that have been, the whole theme of this show is success in business, sports, and life. So it gives us a lot of latitude. If you had to name 3 ingredients, if you had to say to somebody, here's what it's going to take to get to the NFL, besides, how big you are and how fast you are, but 3, sort of qualities inside the heart, what would those 3 qualities be?
I would say, Steve, self-discipline. Self-discipline is the biggest one. Desire would be the second one, and integrity would be the third. Those 3.
What do you mean by integrity in the game?
Well, integrity by that I mean, you're not willing to take any kind of shortcuts to achieve your goal. You're willing to stay the course, put in the work, and do it honestly and fairly.
Ralph, that was awesome. One thing I want to do, I want to thank you. All our audience wants to thank you for being on the show. We always want to end the show with one question, which Steve always asks at the end of the question. Steve, you want to ask that question for Ralph?
Sure. Anything else you want to you ask him, Benito, before we ask that question?
What's your favorite moment coming out of the tunnel at Qualcomm Stadium?
My favorite moment was being introduced, as one of the starting players on the Chargers. And they put your name and, your image up on the scoreboard, and you go running out to the 50-yard line, and 60,000 people are standing on their feet. Hopefully they're not throwing beer bottles at you, but they're screaming bloody murder. And then,
unless you're in Philadelphia.
Oh, you got to love those Philly fans.
Before we end and ask that last question, tell us about toughest place to play. Is it Philly?
I think, Philly is
They're nasty.
Kind of a gnarly spot, no doubt about it. The old Oakland Alameda Coliseum, very difficult. They used to let the grass grow, Steve, about a foot long. The other place was Mile High. Mile High because you got all this oxygen deprivation going on. You're coming off the field and you're searching instead of searching for the Gatorade, you're searching for the oxygen mask.
And they got those fans there in the south stands. Now it's in Vesco, but at Mile High Stadium, they used to have the south stands, which were swaying. It looked like an earthquake was happening because it was so freaking loud.
It was unbelievable, Benito. You could not hear yourself think, especially in 1977, which was the original year of the Orange Crush.
What was the Orange Crush?
That was the nickname for their defense. Mm. And they ended up, that was their first.
Carl Mecklenburg was on that, right?
Right. It was before Mecklenburg. It was Lyle Alzado, Reuben Carter, Randy Gradishar, and among a lot of others. Tom Jackson from ESPN was on that team. They would introduce their team before the game. And you're right, the stadium shook. It was so loud, you could not hear yourself think.
Ralph, I want to ask you another question. What is the coldest stadium you've been to? Like, you got Soldier Field. You have the stadium in Minnesota used to be a dome, but now you have Lambeau. Like, what were those? Was it just the cold would just tear into you, or was it just the attitude of the fans?
No question, Benito. I remember, I think it was 1978, we went to play at the old Vet Stadium in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And it was late November, and the wind chill factor was like minus 15. And they had the old Purple People Eaters with Fran Tarkenton, and that bunch, Chuck Foreman. They figured, we got the pussies from Southern California coming here to play in the cold, and we ended up winning that game, 13-7. But they had the fans in the one end zone. They were topless.
They were
topless fans?
They were topless.
We're going to start having a topless 162 experience. That's next week. You guys want to come back?
Good thing Carrie's hosting.
Carrie and Benito, you've definitely been replaced. Hey, I was looking through your career stats. And you've recovered a fumble?
Actually, Steve, I returned a few kickoffs.
That's what we saw.
Because we saw the negative 32 yards, but how do they judge that?
Yeah, I returned a few kickoffs. I was in the wedge right before the kick returners, 10 yards in front of the kick returners, and so a short ball used to come right to me. So I caught a few and ran it up the field.
Like onside kick?
Similar. Mm-hmm. They'd pop them up, and it wouldn't go to the goal line.
I see.
And I'd be one of the short guys, and I'd end up catching it, running up the field, showed them my crazy legs Hirsch moves, and did what I could.
Man.
Anything to help the team, right?
That's exciting. So you played 73 games.
Yeah.
Is there one? I know we've asked you, your shining moment, or is there one game that was just your favorite game? Like if you look back and say that was the game.
Just that Raider game in 1977 that I talked about. That one was off the charts. I mean, we had in those days 55,000 people at Jack Murphy Stadium, and they were on their feet screaming for blood because there was in those days, guys. There was such a hatred of the Oakland Raiders, twice as much as it was nowadays. That it was awesome.
And did that translate on the field? Did you guys hate each other as much as like?
No, you can't play with that hatred.
Yeah.
You can't. You end up losing. You end up losing focus for the task at hand. Okay, so you have to temper that. You can't let it emotionally get away from you.
Ralph, I'm a huge Raiders fan, and back in the day, those guys came out and brought it every game. It was like the Jack Tatums and everything. Now, what was it? Was it getting into the other team's mindset, or were they just that badass that they brought it?
They were definitely trying to get in your head. Before the 1981 AFC Championship game, John Matuzak was up there in Oakland on the radio, saying, "Hey, Danny, we're coming down to get you, Danny." I mean. They were of course they were led by the master Al Davis. He was the master of the subliminal and
the Raiders.
I know a lot of guys today, Ralph. like if you even take like NBA or something, you got the young guys coming up and they're playing against Kobe just this last season, and they want to beat him. They want to show what's up. And after the game, they're like shaking hands. Was there one guy you were just like, you know what? I couldn't wait to play against him, but I admire this guy, respect this guy.
Absolutely. You know what, Benito? I was of the opinion that anybody that put the pads on and wore a jersey was worthy of my respect. I didn't appreciate guys that kind of crossed the line and played a dirty game. I didn't feel like there was any place for that. But, at that level, when you're playing and it's a business, it's your livelihood, it's bound to happen. And so hopefully it's few and far in between, but invariably, guys cross the line and they might.
Was there that one guy where you just were like, I'm honored to play with him?
Guys on my own team, Ed White, Doug Wilkerson, Dan Fouts, Chuck Muncy, Charlie Joyner, Louis Kelcher, consummate pros, Don Masick, Billy Shields, awesome ball players.
Well, we're here with Ralph Perretta, the 162 Experience, and I know it's like one of those parties you don't want to end. It's been a great interview and a lot of fun, and those of you that don't know Ralph, hopefully you do now. Just what a great guy. Sort of dispels all the myths about professional athletes being dicks or whatever. But Ralph, great guy, and thank you for being on. Any final question? I know we've said that about 10 times.
Awesome information.
Yeah, awesome interview. We appreciate it. What advice, this is what we've been ending with every show, what advice would you give yourself at age 18, knowing what you know now, looking back, 18 years old, you're on Long Island, late 60s, Woodstock's coming up, Vietnam War. What advice would you give yourself?
Man, that was a confusing time. You guys are much younger. That was a very confusing time in America. All of our dads were World War II vets in those days, yep. And it was a different vibe, a different feeling. Like America, right or wrong, it's still my country. That's kind of the way I was when I was 18 years old. I mean, I led a very sheltered life growing up on Long Island. I went to school at Purdue in Lafayette, Indiana, which is, Steve, the most conservative state in the United States. Believe me. Trust me. So, for a young guy, it was an easy transition for me. It wasn't, because there were a lot of college campuses in those days that were pretty radicalized. They were blowing up ROTC buildings, and, at Kent State, they had that awful mob scene where 3 or 4 kids were actually killed by the National Guard. And it was scary times in America, So, I used to just listen to what my dad used to say to me, which was, keep your nose clean, pal.
Yeah.
do the right thing. Go to school, go to class, play football, and everything else takes care of itself.
Awesome.
Simple but great advice.
Awesome. Well, he's an upstanding member of San Diego community. He's a former NFL player. Thank you so much, Ralph Perretta, for being on 162 Experience today.
Steve, Benito, Robert, you guys are too kind.
Awesome. Hey, it's a wrap. 162. We'll see you guys episode 6.
Appreciate it, Ralph.
Thank you.